guys, it's Linda Winter with another Winter Designs project. So this one is actually from Brenda Mays. Brenda had called me and said, why don't you make a 13-inch circle? And I said, I can, I don't have one. And she said, make a 13-inch circle with a fussy cut. So I'll show you, this is the 13-inch circle. The fussy cut is buried underneath there. I'll show you in a minute why she wanted the fussy cut. But these circles, they make a bunch of different things. So I've got all different sizes, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13. There's all different sizes, and you want to have a particular size made, I can do that for you. But what was really cool about Brenda, when I asked why she wanted 13, she wanted it for a tortilla warmer. And I said, well, I had done tortilla warmers out of the microwave bowl cozy and a bunch of different things, but she said the 13-inch she had been making with, I don't know if it was a cardboard or a plastic template or whatever, but she wanted to make them more accurately, more consistently, where that no-slip material worked. So not only did I send her this with the 13-inch fussy cut, but she sent me this already made. And when I got it, I heard this crunchiness. Can you all hear that? Inside of here is that secret ingredient, plastic. The plastic in here, this goes in the microwave, that's going to keep those tortillas really moist, really fresh, really a long time. That plastic also shortens the amount of time that you need to put it in the microwave. So she did these hot air balloons, and you didn't really need to fussy cut that. I'll show you fussy cutting with this fabric over here when I get the table cleared out a little bit, but this is the 13-inch. Well, I made one like this, and notice she's got the binding, and not only did she sew the binding on by machine on the front, but she sewed it on by hand on the back side. I'm not about that, so I made this one. This is a little bit smaller, and you can see I did pre-packaged binding. That's a no-no. Pre-packaged binding, why? It's good for my demo, but this is not safe for the microwave. You have to have 100% cotton fabric. That means your binding, that means your batting, 100% cotton batting, no scrim, 100% cotton thread, but this binding is a polyester, so that won't work. So you need to cut your own binding, and bias binding is of course going to work better because we're working with curves. So this is a pretty sample, but not a real sample to actually use. But I did sew the binding on the front and back at the same time, and you can see I did a hot pink color. Normally when I make stuff like this, I say do something on the outside and then do a lighter fabric on the inside because I want to see what's going in there. Well, what's going in there is something like this. This doesn't pop out to me as much as it would when we look at this, or when we look at this, or when we look at this. So this is the time where we can make the lining a little bit more exciting. All right, so as far as the tortillas go, this is the 13-inch, and these are the largest tortilla wraps that I found. Imagine I've taken these out of the plastic, and we just stick them right inside. So I'm going to put this in here, even though we've got the plastic, and you can imagine that this is going to stay closed in that microwave, even if I have all of these in here, and that fits just fine. This isn't going to work for the 12-inch. Because you can see even with a little bit that I'm going to have left over, that binding is going to make it be too puckery and it's just not going to work. So if you like these larger sizes, then you'll want to do the 13-inch. When we look at the next size, I can work with the 12-inch, I can work with the 13-inch, and my 11-inch, that's what I have here. Let's place these inside. And you can see there are 12 in here, and again, imagine that the plastic isn't there. When I put this inside, you can imagine without that plastic, that still would stay pretty closed in the microwave. So the 11-inch would work just fine for this. And those guys, you can get the idea of that size. I wish they had a measurement on here, but these are the 12 tortilla flour tortillas, and you can get them pretty much anywhere. Pita bread. Pita bread here, you can see that this pita bread, this is going to work right inside of that 11-inch as well. And I've got 3 pita breads in here, and you can see how that puckers up. So I wouldn't want to go any smaller than the 11-inch with this. The 10-inch is just going to be way too small. So you could do the 12-inch, you can do the 11-inch, or you can do the 13-inch if you wanted to do the tortillas, the pita breads. These are the little guys here, and the little guys, of course, are going to fit in the 13, and they're going to fit in the 11. And again, we're never going to probably heat up 22 at a time. But these would also fit, imagine you're putting 8 or so in here, so the 10-inch would work here. This guy right here, this size, the small one, the 10-inch is probably the smallest I would go with that. So in general, if you're going to make tortillas, I would be looking at the 11, the 12, or the 13-inch size of the complete circle. So I'm going to get rid of this here. All right, I want to talk about fussy cutting for a minute because that was one of the things that Brenda wanted. I've got some fabric here. Let's pull this over a little bit so we can see it a little better. And when I look at this fabric, imagine I only have one piece of the fabric. I'm going to take, let's grab our 13-inch. I'm going to grab the 12-inch because I've got it right here. So you can see, let's get all that flat. If I want this right there in the center, then I can look and see where we are in the center. If that's what I want, do I want the radishes? Do I want heritage? You're basically viewing, it's your viewfinder of which one it is you want. Let's go to the 10-inch. Do I want the carrots right there, the carrots and the pepper, that heritage still to be right there? If this is the one that I want to use, and I threw the 10-inch on the floor, so we're going to go to the 11-inch. So if this is the one I want to use, and I like this placement right here, or I like the garlic placement over here, whatever it is that you want, we're viewing this and saying, what is it that I want to feature? When you've got what it is you want, this is my 11-inch, and again, I've got 4 layers. So let's pretend I have 1 layer. There's no point in me fussy cutting 4 layers because I don't know what's underneath. But I'm holding this down. I'm going to place the template right inside. And when I get that where I want, I'm going to pop the fabric. When I lift that fabric, it pops that up. And that allows me to cut and get exactly what it is that I want to fussy cut. So if you've got some really cool fabric that you want to feature for a tortilla wrap, or just in general, something that you're doing where circles are part of it, then that fussy cut frame is an option. You can buy the template by itself, you can buy it with the fussy cut, so it's totally up to you. All right, so Brenda did the 13, I'm going to put that over there. This is the one that I did, and again, my binding, I used a prepackaged binding, not safe for the microwave. So go ahead and make your own binding out of 100% cotton fabric. You can still sew it on like I did if you happen to have one of those bias binder makers that they don't sell anymore, you know, that folds it for you. You can stitch that right on, or you can do the traditional method of sewing on the front, folding it over, and then hand stitching on the back or stitching in the ditch. This is basically the same method as Brenda's, where there's binding all the way around, and we're basically looking, you can see how all of this has been bound. I'm going to show you that method. Then I want to show you another method. I'm not going to go into detail on it because I've got this step out. So basically what we did, I cut 2 circles. You'll see me cut the circles and stack them and sew them and all of that stuff. And I've sewn them around, but let's look underneath here. You can see there's a raw edge there. So I basically turned these right sides out here, and I've top stitched all the way around, and then raw edge, we're looking at like half. Let's pull that off of there. Do you see how it's just a little bit more than half of that to be able to bring the tortillas in? This is all raw edge. What I like about this method is I don't have to put binding on everything, so I only have to do binding about half the way. What we're going to do though with those raw edges is cover it up, so we want to fold that binding back in whatever method works for you. Do you see how that's sticking out? So we would tuck that underneath. And as you go to sew that down, this is where you would stitch on the top and stitch on the back, just like I did here. This method I'm not going to show you because this should be enough of an explanation. So raw edges here, and then you do your bindings. Inside of here, where these come together, you can see how I've stitched, and Sylvester wants to be a part of this too, where I've stitched this together. So this here, and this was actually a little bit wider, so I've trimmed off because our seam allowance would have been inside, so this was a little bit wider, so I trimmed off just a little bit of this from here all the way over to here. Made it even so it was a circle. clip, 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 and then we'll stitch on top of that. So that's an option for you. Then there's this other option, which is a get her done. This is the method that I did years ago when I made some of these. Let me get this out of the way so you can see it. 2 circles. This doesn't have that magic material, the plastic inside of it. It's just got a lining fabric, it's got our 100% cotton batting, and it has the outer fabric. And I sewed my 2 circles together, right sides together, turned right side out, and then top stitched. And you can see over here, this is where I stitch them together because I need that opening. There's my opening. So I have a circle sitting on top. Can you see how that's a finished edge there? That finished edge, I'm just stacking on top of the other, and then I just did kind of a zigzag along that edge. What that allows me to do is have a finished edge here, and I'm just stitching those together. This method you'll see me do with the microwave bowl cozy. I used the 15-inch microwave bowl cozy, and I think the 12.5-inch. The 14 is a great size for that too. But basically we're just going to be top stitching those layers together. And now we have finished edges all the way around. This is the fastest, easiest, but it doesn't always line up right. Do you see how my fabric there is showing a little bit? That's the pressing. It's not the cutting because we've got the circles that give us perfect. It's the pressing and turning, the turning and pressing that make all the difference. So this may not give you as nice of a result. So that method I'm not going to show you either. The method I'm going to show you is this method here. So we're going to start with our fabric. So you're going to be cutting 2, let's go back to this guy. We're going to be cutting 2 circles for the lining and the outer fabric, and inside of here I have 1 piece of batting, 100% cotton batting, no scrim, and I have 1 piece of plastic. The one that I just showed you a minute ago, there's no plastic in there, so it's an option for you. You can use, Brenda used the Ziploc baggies, the heavy duty ones, the biggest ones they have. I have these bags that I put my products in. If you get a bag with a product inside of it in the mail, like the templates that you get from me, if you buy this template, it'll come in a bag. You've already got 1 bag ready for putting this inside of here if you wanted to do that. It's an option. You don't have to do it. It's going to make things moister. It's going to cut down on the time by a lot of how long you put it in the microwave. But the batting, 100% cotton batting, no scrim, and then your thread, just as we've talked about 1,000 times before. Now I've got the threads out to show you. Here's Sewology. Sewology has 3 different types, the smaller spool, a larger spool, and then this is the Pima cotton. All of those I have on my website. Same thing with the Gutermann. Gutermann's a little bit more expensive. They're all 100% cotton thread, so you can use any of those with the project. So it's totally up to you for that. Okay, so let's talk about cutting. If we're going to use the plastic, we're going to be doing this a little bit differently. We're not going to cut out our circle first because with the plastic, you really need to do some kind of stitching. And when you start stitching those layers together, as soon as you start stitching, everything is going to slide around. So we need to work with a bigger piece of fabric. If you're not going to use the plastic, then you're good to go by just cutting out your 3 layers. The outside fabric, the lining fabric, and your batting, and you can cut those 3 layers with this template. What I want to do though instead is use my plastic as my guide. I've got the 11-inch here, and all I'm going to do is just cut off a piece that I'm going to be able to work with. And if you notice, I've got my outer fabric, I've got some batting inside of here, I've got my lining fabric, and I'm basically just going to square off. I don't want to waste any additional fabric, so I'm just leaving everything else pretty much intact. And we're cutting that off, and let's see, I need to get a little bit further on my table. Okay, this can all go by the wayside, and we're not going to cut the circle. What I'm going to do instead is stick this piece inside. We're going to go inside of here, and everything is going to be slip sliding around. So, and the circle plastic doesn't have to be in all of this, but as much as I can have it in there would be a good thing. All right, let's find my pins, and we'll pin this in place. And what we want to do is stitch. I'm going to use one of 3 rulers that Darla suggested that I create. In the past, I would have used a longer ruler, and I never really thought about the frustration and the hassle of using a longer ruler, but Darla said the 10-inch is the right length, mainly because of the table of your sewing machine. We're going to stitch along and move that ruler as we go. I've I pinned over here, and I'm going to pin these this way just to hold in place a little bit. And all of this is probably going to move around on me, but that's okay. So we're just putting a couple pins just to get started. And I'm going to start in the center of this, so I'm going to be repinning as I need to. And all we're doing is sewing our 3 layers together. If I was going to be doing the black croissant method that I had, and it's on the floor somewhere, if I was doing the circles right sides together and then flipping out, this wouldn't work. This will work on this method that we're putting the binding around, which is this one, or it'll work on this method where we're putting the binding around as well. So those methods will work. Okay, so we're going to at the sewing machine stitch here with, and I've got the 1 1/2, I've got the 1 1/4, I've got the 1 inch. If I stitch 1 1/4 or the 1 inch, I'm going to have about a 1 1/4. If I stitch a 1 1/4, I'm going to have about a 1 1/2. And if I stitch the 1 1/2, I'm going to have about 1 3/4. So I'm going to use the 1 1/4 just because it's a little bit closer together. At the sewing machine, we're going to go ahead and use this as my guide. You can increase your stitch length a little bit. I like about a 3/0. And I'm going to start along the edge, and we're going to be trimming this down with our circle. So, you know, if you need to make it a little bit bigger, you know, then you can do that. If you need to go backwards, you know, if we started out a little bit bigger, but I'm basically going to be stitching here. I am going to back stitch just a little bit on there, and we'll go forward. So what is my job? My job is just to look where the ruler is. I'm not paying attention to the foot so much. I'm just looking at the ruler, and I am going to just give this a little bit of a helping hand too, because that plastic is wanting to slide. And even here, putting my hand here with that plastic. Now, I'm getting close to the end of the ruler. I've still got a couple inches, but I'm going to move it down. Just moving it right along the edge of that foot. And when I get close here, I'm going to remove that pin where I held those edges together. Now we can turn and go over on the other side if we want to. What I'm going to do is lift this up, pivot, and notice my fabric here has a little bit of a pucker. That's because of that plastic moving along. And I'm going to trim this top thread so it doesn't get caught. Place this ruler back down. And I'm going to be following this ruler along the edge of where I stitched. I'll take a couple stitches, and then I'm going to move my hand here, and I've got a thread popping up, so let's get that out of the way so it doesn't come back and bite me. And the black thread with the black fabric means that it's not going to show real well because it's hard for me to see. So I'm going to move my ruler here as we go. And on we go. I'm going to do the same thing, and we're going to move this over. You get the idea of how we're going to use these rulers. The rulers are just to hold my layers together and keep that plastic in there. You can choose to do this if you want to. You can do any stippling. You don't have to do this at all. It's up to you. I'm going to move that ruler down just a little bit. All right, I'm going to finish up with this, and we'll come back when this is finished, and then I'll show you how to cut our circle from these 3 layers. I'll see you in a minute. All right, so here's what we've got when we've done some channel stitching. This is without channel stitching. I'll show you how we're going to do this. I'm going to do this for the back side. I'm going to do this for the front side. This has our plastic in it. This doesn't. If you like the idea of the plastic, then do it on the front and back. So we've got our 3 layers stitched together. It's going to be a lot easier for me to cut this out now because I've done that channel stitching. With the plastic, it's not going to be all slip sliding away. So I'm going to go ahead and use my rotary cutter, and we're going to cut off. This is the same approach whether we're cutting this with or without the plastic. So we're going to cut off, and I'm moving that template. And because that plastic is kind of locked in, I don't have to worry about all of my layers going all over everywhere. You notice what I'm doing? I'm cutting off. You can, if you wanted to, go ahead and go around, turn that template, go around, turn the template, go around, turn the template. You just have to remember where you started and stopped. So it's totally up to you whether you cut off and turn the template, cut off, or go around turning the template as you go. And way back when I did a video, I think it's called Cut Around or Cut Off. So it talks about cutting with our rotary cutter and with the template. So there is my circle. I've got a circle. I want to top stitch around here, edge stitch, and then I'm going to do the same thing here. If you notice, these layers are a little more kind of confined and in control versus this, where they're not quite so consistent. So you choose what look and what quality you're going to get. I like this look. It's just an extra step. So at the sewing machine, we're going to just edge stitch around. You can use an edge stitch foot if you want to. I'm going to use the edge of my foot and move my needle over a bit. And I'm right back to where I started. So that's our one piece that has the plastic in there. And I'm going to do this. And you'll see this one, there's going to be more batting showing. And that batting and the fabrics, they may not lie as flat and as consistent because I've just stacked those layers together. And sometimes you'll get little puckers in there too. You could use the stiletto if that's going to help you instead of your finger right in front of the foot like I'm doing. All right, so here are the two layers that I've got. I would again recommend that you do the channel stitching with the plastic or without the plastic and stitching around so that you have two that match. But you know, it's totally up to you. The reason why I say that is because one side is inevitably going to be nicer than the other side, and you don't want this. Right now, this would be the top for me. So if I did two of these, then I'd pick the one that I like better. If I had two of these, then I'd pick the one that I like better, with plastic, without plastic. What we're going to do though at this point is stack these two up. I've got directional fabric here for the cactus, so I want to make sure that when I have these lined up, the cactus is going this way and the cactus is going this way. So I'm going to flip this over, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so what do we need to do? We're going to be, at this point, binding this part. I'm going to grab this over here. We're going to bind this part and this part first. And then you can see we're going to do this binding afterwards. So we can do a couple things. We can put the binding on there first, the binding on here first, and then stitch this together, or we could stitch this together. I like putting the binding on first, then stitching afterwards because it's going to be easier. But I am going to pin these together just further down. We have to figure out where we want the binding to start. And you can have it halfway. I don't like halfway because I want this to be a little more closed, but it's up to you. So you can use your mat, you can use the ruler. We have 11 inches, so this is my 10 inch. And if we look to see basically this ruler where our half is, I could say, let me go a little bit further than that. But I'm basically going to be using whatever that works for me eyeballing, or the mat for measuring. It's totally up to you. Do you see how right here, when I'm folding this back, that's going to be my opening that I have here? So you can snip if you want to. I'm going to put a pin here because we're going to be having binding here. I need the binding to go a little bit further down. We're going to be putting our binding on the outer part on top of that binding underneath. There's a big bulk there, a bit of bulk here too. And you can see with the prepackaged binding, which is what I'm going to be using, again, not safe for the microwave, so do your own binding, but then you can fold it if you want and stitch it on the front and back like I'm going to be doing, or you can stitch on the front and then flip it over. So totally up to you. But you can see basically here's where I have. I also use this stitch. Here, you can see the stitches are going this way versus this way. So if you had stitches going this way, you could use that as your guide. So we put a clip here. I'm going to look to see, this is basically up and down, and right about over here is where I want to have my pin too. Now this is just a guesstimate because again, we're going to start the binding a little bit further and we're going to go all the way around. I'm not going to do all of this on camera, but I will do a little bit for you because you don't need to see me doing all of it. You can stitch this back down if you want to, or you can give it a good press. This doesn't matter though, stitching down, because this area here where we're putting this on, it's going to be covered up. Later on, that will matter. So later on, where we're going to stitch that down. So for now, we can just attach this here. And again, you can decide if you're going to be doing, I'm going to put the pin back here a little bit. You can decide if you're going to be doing binding all the way around, or doing like I have here, or doing this kind of binding too. This method is not where we are here because I have a raw edge and I have a finished edge here. So this was a complete circle that I turned right sides out. I only sewed, you can see here, this was turned right sides out, and then I only top stitched that little bit there. Hope that makes sense to you. Okay, so we are going to, for our binding, start right about here. And you don't even need to have the two tortillas pinned together at this point, just as long as you know where you're going to be starting. So I'm going to place this here, and I think I actually will unpin those. Now that I've said that, let's do that. Again, it's been a couple weeks since I made one, and I've done a lot of other projects in the meantime. So, it's one of those things. If you're watching the video, you may need to go back and refer to the video some other time. So I'm going to put a pin here. Clips work really well for bindings too. Or just going caution to the wind and start stitching. I'm going to go ahead and stitch this down. In the past, when I've talked about bindings, I've said cheater stuff, the glue, the tapes, all of those things. None of those things. Not for this one, because this is going in the microwave, so none of those things are safe. Even this binding that I have here, it really isn't safe either. Now you can use a zipper foot if you want to. A zipper foot would help out quite a bit. You can use whatever it is you want. I'm going to move my needle way over, and I start to stitch. I'm just going to keep this inside. And the black on black really is hard to see, so I'm going to be going more on feel. And I'm actually going to cut a little bit more than what I need, so I don't have all this bulk here. And that lets me know also how far I want to go. And when I get to, I removed that pin where I was earlier, so I'm going to say right about here where that stitching is where I'm going to stop. So you can see how that stitch right there, how it crosses there. That's where I'm going to stop. Okay, so I'm going to feel as I go. And again, you can pin if you want to. I'm at about a 3/0 stitch length, and that works out really well. And we're just going to stop and continue to keep this open and get it nice and tight. Not so tight that I have more on the back than I have on the front, or less on the back. And my needle position probably should be moved over 1. So I'm going to be watching my foot a little bit. Take your time on this. It is going to give you better results. If you are going to get better results if you stitch on the front and then flip it over to the back. But I'm kind of one of those that I don't want to take the time to do that, but it's up to you. And check as you're going to make sure, oh yeah, I'm catching way more. And the binding definitely has an edge where there's more on one side than on the other. And I've got it on upside down where I have less binding on the front than I do on the back. And that's okay, because I'd rather have more on the back where it's not really going to show, knowing that I've caught it on the back too. And I'm just feeling inside. I'll do this one and then finish up on this edge, and then the next one I won't show you on camera because you get the idea. And you'll probably be doing a better job than me anyway on this. Okay, so I've got right here is where that's coming together, where those stitches were, and I'm gonna, when I get to that, I'm gonna stop and double check where I was and see for my placement. All right, let's take a look on the table. All right, so if I look on the table here, this blue line, that blue line, that's a little bit less than half, and so I'm good with that. Okay, now when we do this next side, that's where we're gonna wanna make sure that we've marked where we started and where we stopped. Right here is where I'm stopping. I jumped the gun earlier. Been there, done that? Have you all done that before? And then right here is where I'm gonna be starting. All right, so I'm going to go off camera and stitch my binding over here, then we'll come back to the next step. All right, so I've got my binding here and I've got my binding here. So what I want to do is look at my edges, and I'm basically going to now clip the bottom, and we're going to trim things up where the bindings are, and then we're going to sew these edges together. I'm not so concerned about this lining up as much as I am this lining up. I don't know if you can tell, I can barely see, but I want this, excuse me, to be lined up a little bit more, because that's what's going to be showing. This bottom part is going to be encased in the binding, so that's not as big a deal. So I'm lining that up evenly there, and I think what I'll do is actually put some clips here too. There's no, secret, like only one way to do this. This is whatever way works best for you. So you do what makes sense for you. And again, the idea of doing a binding halfway and then add a binding for the two pieces. So we bound one piece, we bound another piece, and now we're going to bind the two pieces. That's totally up to you. What I do want to do though is trim off all this bulk that's here, and you can see where I stopped sewing here. I started or stopped, I'm not sure which, but I want to actually stitch a little bit further down on this one, and then let's look over here and probably stitch a little bit further down here. So I probably could have lined those up a little bit more evenly. So let's trim off this excess here and see where we are here. Okay, yep, so this guy here, you can see I want to stitch down. We'll trim off a little bit more. And I'm going to stitch this down there, and then let's come over here, and you can see this one. I'm going to stitch all the way where this is, I think, and then you can see I have less binding here and more binding there, so we'll trim that off on the front. And that means I don't need to sew as much down over here. And we're going to be covering this up so it's not going to be showing. All right, so back of the sewing machine, I'm going to stitch this one down. I'm going to leave that one as and stitch these down here. So we're just getting these a little bit more consistent. And this is the kind of project that I love, where it's just a guesstimate when you're doing this. I've got everything clipped together, and mainly I just don't want to lose what's under my fingers, which I have. So we'll put the pin in, put the needle down in, and then I'm just going to scoot all of this over underneath. The stiletto would be great for this too, but I don't have the stiletto where I am. Okay, I'm just going to back stitch a little bit. This is going to be covered up. And I'm just kind of stitching over this because there's a lot of bulk there, and I'm going to trim off some of that binding there. Okay, we've done that one side. Let's come to this side. And again, I'm just going to kind of stitch back, kind of a zigzag a little bit, just so that whole piece of binding is attached there. I'll do the same thing over here. We're just locking this in place. It's going to be covered up, so no big deal. And this is more just a precaution than anything else. All right, we've done those two. And it's this one here that I need to do. Okay. All right, we're going to trim off this excess because we don't need that there. And you'll take the time to clean all these threads up. And we're going to put that binding around the bottom half after we stitch these pieces together. So our outside and inside of the top, and our outside and our inside of the bottom, or whichever one works. Okay, so we're going to start stitching here and stitch all the way around. When we get over here, we're going to stitch all the way around, and our binding is going to be covering up from here. Can you see the end of the binding? And the end of the binding, we're going to start right about here. So I'm basically going right about where that binding is. And again, I'm going to move my needle position over. Let's see. And I'm just locking in place a little bit there. Now, some of you might think, oh, this would be a good time to serge. Nope, because your serger thread is not 100% cotton. You could, if you wanted to, swap out the serger threads, just wind up a bobbin, 4 bobbins to be exact, of 100% cotton thread, and then put them on top of those serger cones if you wanted to, and serge around these edges. But it's not really worth it because it's just a holding in place step anyway. All right, so we're going to kind of lock that in here. All right. And now we're going to grab our binding that we have, and we're going to join all of these together. And then we'll look at those other options. I want to make sure that what I was telling you about this other method and that other one that I have on the floor, the croissant one, that those are clear too. So you can choose which method you like. Okay, so we need to finish up these edges, and that's where I talked about earlier. We didn't need to do it then, but we need to do it now. So you can press that down, you can stitch that down, whichever way you go, but this is going to go, see all that bulk that's here? This is going to go over here. If I've got too much bulk, then again, I can trim all that excess off. Can you see how there's a lot more fabric there? So I'm going to be trimming off, especially on this side here, because this one is good, but this one, not so much. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch this down. If you have a leader on your sewing machine, a leader of fabric, if you know what that means, if you've got, I don't know what else they call it. They call it a lot of different things, but basically, you know, where you've already sewn onto your fabric. My machine doesn't always like doing what I'm doing right now. You know, a lot of times it'll actually eat up my fabric. So, you know, if you're sewing with that piece of fabric first. Okay, all I've done is just folded that over. And we're going to get rid of those threads. I'm going to trim off the edges a little bit. And I don't know why. Today I'm having a hard time seeing this black, which is good if you guys can't see it. But if it's only me that can't see it, then that's not good. Okay, so we're going to trim off this excess here. I just want these to be lined up consistently. All right, so there's a little bit less there. Let's find that piece here. And again, this is where if you sewed it on the front and turned around to the back side, you might get a better look. We don't need that anymore there, so I'm going to put this here to hold that in place. And it looks like now I've got the wider part here on the front, and I really don't have a choice because I've sewn this side down. I don't need to sew that other side down because I don't know where I'm going to really stop. So we're going to stitch here and stitch all the way around. I want to make sure that this is secure. So you can see on the green it's a little bit easier. I stitched across here. I'll do that probably afterwards. And then I stitched a couple times here because that's where, it's not a whole lot that you're going to be pulling there, but I want to make sure that this is all safe and secure and it's not going to fall apart. So I'm basically going to stitch here. I may, if I could go this way and then down, that's an option for you. It's based on your sewing machine. All right, so I've folded over my fabric. I've stitched that down, and I decided to place a clip right where that folded fabric is, and I'm going to stitch beyond that, and then I'll come back and stitch that part later on. So what I'm going to do again is just keep all of this nice and tight inside of there, and if you want to move your needle position to whatever works for you, then go ahead and do whatever works. We're trying to catch the back side, not have too much, not have too little. And if you have stitched further away from your edge here, then trim this up so you don't have much seam or much bulk in there, because we don't want to miss on the back side. If you want to stop along the way and check the back to make sure that you're catching and that your seam is in correct placement and all of that, you're welcome to do that. But just take your time as you stitch. And I had something grabbing my sewing machine just a minute ago. So if you've got clips along the way, just make sure that everything is nice and free. When I get close to the other side, we're going to stop about 1 inch away. And then we're going to fold that fabric back just like we did for this one, for that first side. And we'll finish that edge, the end first, and then we'll go back to the beginning. And I've got several more inches, so I'm going to continue to sew till I get a little bit closer. And the other thing I'm going to do too is we'll go to the table. I'm going to go ahead and cut more fabric than I need. We're going to go over to the table and we'll look. Now I've got that clip there, so it's kind of in my way, but right there where that clip is, and this is the side that has the plastic face up, so you can see when I place this here, let's get all this out of the way. When I place this here, right about there is where my seam is. So right about where this blue line is. So basically we're going to go probably here, and so I'm going to chop that off just a little bit past my fingernail. All right, so we're going to fold this over, stitch that down, and then we'll finish up that side. And what that's going to let us do is have this nice opening there. And you can feel the plastic in here makes that fold down a little harder than this one, but that plastic is what's going to make all the difference. Okay, so let's stitch this side down just like we did before, and I've given myself plenty of room here to be able to cover that. And you can press that down if you want to with a stiletto or at the iron. All right, we were working on, let's see, let's get this here. We were working on this side. So I want to make sure that all of this, I don't want it loose like that. I want to have it nice and tight. So if you want to grab pins, you can do that. I'm just going to put a clip on here just to kind of hold that down. And you can see even there, see how it's a little bit further away? So I just want to make sure, maybe a smaller clip or a pin would work. But we're back at the sewing machine. And the stiletto would be really good where I am right now. All right, I'm going to go ahead and back stitch. And I'm going to peek underneath and make sure, and you can see I've caught the binding on the back, so I don't need to worry about that. Now I'm going to stitch over this. And again, if you had a stiletto, you could kind of use that stiletto to push that binding a little bit further over. I'm okay with it. All right, so we've done that one side. Now we're going to come back here, and we want to finish up on here. So right here. And I probably, you have to decide which way you want to tackle this, because we want it to be as close to the edge. Can you see how this, even so, is a little bit further off once I trim those threads? It's a little bit further away. You can see where we started and stopped. It's not the end of the world, but, I'd like to get it as much as possible to where it looks decent. Okay, so we're going to go right along the edge, I think. And then I'm going to back stitch. Put my needle down, come on over. Yeah. And when I get that needle to where I want in position, then I'll turn it this way. Okay, let's take a look and see what we've got. All right, so cut all your threads, and notice what I did here. I stitched the edge. That edge first, that just holds everything in place, and that's actually not a bad idea to do on all of these. Stitching on that edge down keeps it in place. If I'd done that here, it probably would have given me a little bit better of a finish here. So either way you go, what we've got is a tortilla warmer with binding on the openings that we did 2 pieces of bindings and then 1 piece of binding to join these together. This can be a really quick project if you're not doing the channel stitching, if you're not doing the plastic, but even if you are doing the plastic, you could do those sandwiches, you know, in one sitting, do a whole bunch of them. But let's take a look at what we've got. This is our tortilla warmer. Open up and we can put those tortillas right inside of there. So a fun, cute little project. I love this fabric. I think it's a great way for you to, again, make another gift. If you're going to be doing these kinds of things for things that you're selling, write up some directions, write up the steps. I'm going to have directions on using a tortilla warmer and how to put this in the microwave, because we are talking about the microwave. So I will have that. And if you purchase the circle templates, 11, 12, or 13, I'll include those directions for you. So you have directions not only on how to make them, but also how to use them for the microwave. I want to go back and reference this again, and I'm going to grab that croissant one because I want to show you the difference between these to make sure it makes sense. All right, so what did we do? We did wrong sides together. We stitched up circles with raw edges. We did right sides together. We turned right side out, made 2 sandwiches that are circles. Top stitched all the way around, stacked them on top, and then stitched these from here to here. See that opening that's there? Stitch this together, 2 circles on top of each other. So wrong sides together, right sides together. What did we do here? We still made 2 circles, but let's pull this off so you can see. And this one is a little more complicated. It's just going to have binding on half of the project versus all of the project. Do you hate bindings? Then go this way. Do you not love bindings, but not crazy about it either? So then you can go this way. If you think the consistency of the bindings, I kind of like the consistency of the bindings, then go this way. So let's go back to this one. So I did 2 circles. I flipped them. This guy here, I flipped the right sides together and I flipped them out, pressed. Did the top stitching here, but only did, when I sewed those circles, only sewed right sides together a little bit more than halfway. This was still left raw. When I flipped that out, I pressed this down, I top stitched this, and then this, I didn't have to do any turning with the little opening because I have this huge opening. We're sewing those layers together here, raw edges versus finished edges, and then we add the binding here. This binding, just like we folded it under, we would be doing the same thing, trimming that binding off and putting that on there. Okay guys, I think that is it. I hope this makes sense to you. I want to show you a couple other things that you can put inside of these. Of course, tortillas and the pita breads, those things that I showed you before. But you could also put some of the chips. I don't know how well these chips will really work because you've got a bunch of them in there. I think these would be better in my potato bag or mostly in the popcorn bag. We're in the potato bag too. So let me show you that real fast so you can see. The potato bag that's for corn and sweet pea, sweet breads and sweet potatoes and those kinds of things. This style here, I have a video that's called the microwave bag for potatoes, no raw edges. The raw edges are the big deal. When you open this up, you have no raw edges in here, so no food is going to be inside of here raw growing on there, because this can go in the washer and dryer. You know, it's kind of a fun thing to be able to do. But I really think this kind of thing could go in the potato bag too. So the potato bag, or the popcorn bag. The popcorn bag, you'll see I have a video on this. And again, no raw edges. So when I open this up, No raw edges inside even. And what's cool about this is that it has the boxed bottom. So if you wanted to put some of these in there, you know, you could warm them up in the microwave too. So, and again, if you purchase the template for this, this is the microwave bag template. It makes the popcorn bag, it makes the potato bag. Then I'll give you the directions on how to make these, but then also how to heat these up, how to use these. So you've got circles for tortillas, 11, 12, 13. Those are the sizes that I recommend best for you. So this is the one that Brenda Mays made that really started this whole thing, because I had done tortilla warmers before, but different styles. But I love that this is the shape of your tortillas. So this is the 13-inch. This is an 11-inch. I've got another 11-inch, another 11-inch. I thought I was doing a 12-inch somewhere along the way, but I didn't. So imagine the difference between here and what you could put inside of there. Okay, guys, that is it. You can find these on my website, winnerdesigns.com. If you're having a problem getting to my website, you can always go to winner-designs.myshopify.com. We'll have it on the screen for you. Sometimes my website doesn't work. And by the way, if you follow me on Facebook, my Facebook is Linda Winner Designs, or Winner Designs for Sewing and Quilting. I announced all of this stuff on Facebook before the videos were posted, and I had giveaways. I had a gift with purchase. So if you don't do Facebook, or you do Facebook but you haven't followed me, follow me, because I just had a big sale when I went out of town, and I just offered a gift with purchase. So if you like stuff like that, follow me on Facebook. It's too hard for me to do it on a video, because then I'd have to take the video down when the date ends. So if you do Facebook, follow me, and we'll have that on the screen for you as well. And I'll have all of this information in the description too. But I try to post new products, new videos, new directions, new giveaways, new sales, all that kind of stuff on my Facebook page. It's just easier to be able to post, and then it's gone, or I can take it down, or you guys can ask questions. Where YouTube, it's a little bit harder to do. So I hope you have fun making these. They are kind of addictive. I love doing stuff for kitchens. I love doing stuff for gifts, and I think these would be, all of these would be really great projects for you to make, to sell, to give, to whatever. You know, your family's going to want one for sure. So make some extras for brothers, sisters, whoever. So thanks for watching, guys, and have fun.